I'm surprisingly nervous about today's topic in a good way, nervous in a good way. We're talking about from heartbreak to health. This is going to be the first in a series of lives that I'm wanting to do that really bring to light the connection of our mental health and our physical health, particularly our pelvic floor, okay? This is a topic that I'm incredibly passionate about. I have a lot to say on the subject, and I think it's really important, of course, to start this video off that this is a super humble offering that I'm making. I'm a physical therapist. That's my training. Massive interest in personal development, psychology, spirituality, personal growth, like all of this stuff. Huge interest since I was like 16. I've been interested in this, and I'm 42 now, so it's been a while. But I'm not a psychologist. I'm not a trained mental health provider, and I'm also not a spiritual counselor. So it's really important to just sort of start that off by saying, you know, if you're watching this and any of this speaks to you, it's so important to get help from a professional who is trained in really working with the mind, body, and particularly mental health. So again, I really think that heartbreak is a universal thing that almost everybody has experienced heartbreak to varying degrees. And it is something that can literally, it's called heartbreak for a reason, because you literally feel like your heart is breaking. And I wanted to bring this up because I think that especially like the times, right? The times of the world right now, I think that a lot of us experienced a big shift during COVID, during the pandemic and during lockdown. And for whatever it, for all the chaos that it brought a lot of positive changes for some people and a lot of really hard changes and a lot of really looking at your life and figuring out more about yourself or maybe more about your relationship or whatever that could, in some cases, led people to making big transitions or realizing who the hell am I, right? Like who am I? What do I want? Maybe it led to some heartbreak, And so, of course, not everyone had that experience, but I've heard it from so many people that they did have that experience within the last couple of years. And also it could be that, I'm usually attracted to people who are about my age, and I'm in my 40s. And that's a big time of transition for a lot of people too. Your 40s, 50s, you're kind of going through that midlife crisis time. And I certainly did. So all that being said, I want to talk today about heartbreak. I'm today going to share how my heartbreak impacted my physical body and how my physical body ultimately helped my heartbreak. And I want to talk about how, again, this stuff can impact your pelvic floor to maybe help you, not by hearing my story because you care so much about my story, but because maybe my story can help you, if you're watching this, put some puzzle pieces together for yourself. Or if you're a provider and you're watching and you don't really use this and talk about it much in your practice as maybe a pelvic floor PT, maybe you can start, because this is a big deal, especially in pelvic health, is our emotions, our heart, our mental health, our emotional health, all of this, it really impacts our pelvic floor. And so I want to pull it all together by sharing my story today. And I don't know where this will go. What I intend to do is to share some techniques and things that I've been working on that have helped me over the, whenever I do these little series, but I wanted today to really kind of share more about my story. So we may bring on other people and share their stories and talk more about different types of heartbreak. Certainly just a prolapse itself or a pelvic health issue itself can cause heartbreak. But also other things in life can cause emotional pressure or emotional heartbreak that can lead to aggravating pelvic floor symptoms. And that's more my story. And so that's more the kind of perspective I want to come from today. So I think that this will be less of a Q&A. Often I come on these lives and do Q&As and stuff about pelvic health questions. And if anyone has comments or wants to share, I'm happy. I'll look through at the end, but I probably won't be answering questions that are random about pelvic floor stuff. I really want to focus in on this topic of from heartbreak to health, and how, we often have that breakdown before the breakthrough, and how you really can triumph after grief. But what I really want to hone in on today is how long it can take to get over a heartbreak. It's not a fun thing to hear, because I think in our society, like, we want to just be quick and speedy and we want to get through things fast, but it can take a long time, and a lot longer than you want it to. And so I just want to give anyone listening and watching who resonates with this message some grace that it takes time, and to not worry if you feel like you're not on the timeline of healing. When I experienced my big heartbreaking thing, I thought, oh, this will probably take like 3 or 4 months to kind of get over. And it took me almost 1.5 years. Sorry to say it, but it's true. And so I came across this yesterday in an interview I did with a client of mine who had prolapse surgery recently, and she was feeling like she should be farther along. She's about 11 weeks post-op. And I was telling her, gosh, Nicola, we think in our society, we're conditioned that everything has to happen so fast, but there's so much happening under the scenes, so much healing happening behind the scenes. And we've got to give ourselves grace, because this stuff takes a while to soothe, not just physical surgeries, but also heartbreak, right? It's almost as big a deal as a surgery sometimes. So they're really big deals, these things that happen in our lives. So that's setting the stage. And this might be it will be a longer Instagram live. And so I'm just going to take up the space that I feel that I need. And if you feel interested and compelled by this, then I hope you'll watch. And if not, I get it. It's just my story. So I actually wrote notes, because I was like, I don't know how this will feel to share some of this stuff. But I'm going to go ahead, and if I'm looking over here, it's because I'm going to kind of look at what I've written down. So here's the connections. Again, we're talking about how heartbreak can impact our pelvic health, and ultimately our body can heal and our heartbreak, and how it can take a long time. So don't give up on yourself. Do not give up on yourself, okay? Do you hear that? Don't give up on yourself. I'm just going to say it one more time, because I'm like feeling the vibes coming through. Don't give up on yourself, okay? So about 1 year before COVID happened, and I'm going to not say names, and I'm not going to go into detail just to protect, parties involved, but I actually developed this friendship that might not seem like a big deal. It's a friendship, but I developed a friendship that ultimately wasn't healthy for me. And so that was about 1 year before COVID that I developed this friendship. And I really did find that lockdown and all the changes of the pandemic and things, stressors and things I was dealing with, it really shook up life in so many ways for me, just like I know it did for so many other people too. And for me, everything was shifting. And again, I was 40. So I literally was 40 right around this time of COVID. And for me, it was a big year when I turned 40. A lot changed inside. I was starting to, my hormones are changing, and I'm feeling like these stirrings of like, what am I doing with my life? And who am I really? And all these things anyway. And then I think a lot of us in COVID found that relationships were being tested. We were sort of stuck with our families. Maybe we were, stuck inside with our partners. We didn't have as much to talk about. That was definitely my story, is like my husband and I felt like we didn't really have, it's like we were losing some of the things we had in common, which a lot of it was travel. And we lived in Europe at the time, in Germany, and we had done a lot of traveling, and that was always a fun topic of conversation. And where are we going to go next? And blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden we didn't have that anymore. And we just started talking about COVID and talking about, the situations and various newsy things. And we kind of got in a little rut there. So that's a little relational thing that happened. And I got really bored of that. I didn't want to talk about that anymore. There was all the stressors of my son being at home and homeschooling and all that. And then I was also really expanding and growing my online business because I could. And COVID was a really big time for online businesses to grow. And so I was really diving into work. And I dove into work, and I dove into this, other interests, essentially, besides my family and my relationship. And I really started getting into this, like I said, there was a friendship that was ultimately not a good friendship for me. And I really got into that. I started having a lot of emotional questions about everything. Who am I? What am I here for? What am I doing? Like, how do I feel about X, Y, and Z? How do I feel about this? What do I want to do with myself, with my life? Like, all these questions were coming into my mind, and it was starting to give me some feelings of shame and guilt. And there was a lot going on. Okay. So now I want to tell you about my body and what happened to my body. So all this is happening in my mind, in my emotions, in my heart. And during this time, my pelvic tension started really increasing, and I started developing these knots in my perineum. And it's really funny, like being a YouTube person, is I have like a video journal of this stuff happening to me. And I can look back, and I don't like to look back at the videos that I filmed during this like 2-year time period, because I can really see, I can see the turmoil that I was going through, even though I, didn't talk about it, but I could see it. I was losing weight, and I was, and sometimes I was really elated and I was like, woo! And other times I was drawn and gaunt. And I know that during that time I also developed proctalgia fugax, which is like pain in the ass. It's like your rectum, you get these rectal spasms. I started having that. I started having knots of tension in my perineum, that area between your vagina and your anus, your taint. And I started having prolapse symptoms. They were coming back. And I actually have a video on YouTube called my prolapse relapse or something like that. And it's not so much that my prolapse was actually getting worse. It's just that prolapse is very sensational. Like, yeah, my pelvic organs have shifted since I gave birth, almost 16 years ago now, but it's not symptomatic at all, except when I have pelvic tension and these knots of tension in my perineum, because I'm stressed and I have all this emotional stuff that's causing my body to just hold tension in my hips, my belly, my pelvic floor. So I had all this stuff going on. And so it made the prolapse more sensational. It made me feel it more, essentially. So prolapse, relapse, the tension, what else did I say in here? I started getting stomach issues. I would go on walks every day, because that's just what I do to take care of my mental health. And I would go on these walks, and literally, no joke, I would have to pull over luckily I lived in the woods. And so I was literally on forest trails, and I'd have to pull over and have diarrhea, like in the woods, because I had such bad diarrhea every day. I was having diarrhea multiple times a day. My stomach was just in knots. I couldn't sleep. And with all of this going on, the pelvic tension, the diarrhea every day, and all of this, I also developed this hemorrhoid. This is a funny story, kind of. I developed this hemorrhoid. I also have a YouTube video about hemorrhoids from this time period. I developed a hemorrhoid that was so bad, I actually thought it was rectal prolapse. Like, I literally thought I had developed rectal prolapse. I had to go to the doctor with my husband as like chaperone. And I literally had to bend over in front of this young male doctor. He was kind of handsome too. And I had to like bend over and show him my hemorrhoids. And I was like, I'm a pelvic floor PT. Is this a prolapse? And he said, no, it's just a really bad hemorrhoid. And so all of this is due ultimately to what was going on up here in my mind, in my emotions, and in my heart, causing all of this upset and turmoil in my belly, my hips, tension, symptoms, which was then feeding into the stress of all this and making everything worse, right? So yes. Okay. So that's where we're at in the story right now. We have the mind affecting the body. And let me go ahead, and I'm just going to read a little bit from what I wrote down, because I want to make sure I stay on track. Ultimately, I realized this has got to stop. I have to switch things up. Ultimately, the friendship that I had that was not a good friendship for me, it ended. But when it ended, it wasn't just that relationship and that friendship and all that. It was me. And it was me questioning everything about myself. And again, kind of like, how did I even allow myself to get into that type of friendship? What do I want in my life? Who am I? What do I even want anymore? What do I want with my career? Can I trust my intuition? Why did my intuition lead me in this particular direction? And can I trust myself? All of this stuff. I tried to leave my husband. So that's the very sad, it's looking back now, it's a very sad part of my story, is I did big marital crisis. And I really felt like I was falling apart, and I had a nervous breakdown that almost sent me to the hospital. I was on the floor. I will never forget this day. I've never been in such a low point. I was crying. I was in this ball. I was sweating. I was shaking. I couldn't talk. I couldn't breathe. I've never seen myself like this before. And I was almost looking at myself from above, and I'm like, whoa, this isn't good. And my husband was there, and he said, I'm going to take you to the hospital. And I said, no, because I had to work. Isn't that wild? I had to work. And so that was my lowest point, I would say. I did pull myself out of this situation, but it wasn't over. I mean, just all of that upset and the ending of that friendship and all of this, I know it sounds like why would it be such a big deal? But it was, just trust me, it was. And I thought the pain would end. Like I said earlier, I thought that it would take a couple months and I'd get over it and I'd move on and everything would be okay. But it wasn't the case. My heart was literally broken, and I didn't know who I was anymore. I felt like I literally had died, like to myself, who I was. And I just kept grieving, and I kept realizing this is grief, and I've never had this before. I'm lucky to say that I've been privileged enough to not really have dealt with grief in the past like this. And I did keep working. I kept showing up, and so probably nobody knew that I was going through this, but I was on the inside not well. And I had a few people reach out who knew me from, just from things. And they were like, are you okay? Again, like, have you lost weight, or, is everything okay? And I would just, choose and pick who I talked to carefully, because I had talked to a few people about my situation, and they didn't understand, and I didn't feel validated, and I felt like they couldn't hold my emotions. And so I learned discernment, and you can't talk to everybody about it. But luckily, I found a therapist. I was able to talk to a therapist. I was able to have a few good friends that I could talk to. And I let myself grieve, because I realized that this grief process that had started wasn't going to get easier, because we were about to move across the world. So right around that time, my adrenals are already shot, and we moved from Germany to Oregon, where I am now. And that's a huge move. And there was a lot to it. Obviously, anyone who's moved even across the state knows that there's a lot to moving, but across the world. And then also my husband, changed careers, and it was just a big thing. And also the structure of my business changed during that time too. So I had to completely restructure how I was running my business. So there was a lot. Again, my adrenals needed a lot of support. Plus I was dealing with this grief. But what happened? And again, like I said, I want to go back to something that one of my mentors, Tammy Kent, she's amazing. Tammy Kent, she's the author of Wild Feminine, Wild Creative. She says, if you really want to make medicine, go to the hardest places. And I'm going to say that again, because it's just so damn good. If you really want to make medicine, go to the hardest places. And she also says, bring blessings to the tender places. And so even despite all of this stuff, and again, thank goodness I had a few good friends, and I had a therapist, and I had my husband who stayed by my side throughout all of this. And it makes me cry saying it, actually. But I did bring blessings to the tender places, even though I hated myself. I really did. And I truly thought that the pain would never end. I thought that I would never stop thinking about and replaying some of the things that had gone wrong, and that I felt some, angst about, or that I had felt victimized about or angry at, that I had felt wronged by. I felt like I was always on the verge of tears. And so anyone who's been through heartbreak probably knows that feeling, where literally anything can set you off. anything, and you feel like they're constantly on the verge. I'd never had that before. And during this time period, I experienced it. So I realized though, through all of this, that this is truth, that this is also something, I wrote this down because it's so good. It's from a coach of mine. She says it's the stories we tell ourselves about a situation that turn it into heaven or hell, not the situation itself. And so that can be hard for some people to hear, because you're like, wait a minute, hold up, my situation is hell. But I understand, believe me. And I know that my situation is nothing compared to what some people go through. I mean, I didn't lose a child. I didn't, there's a lot of things that there's so many heartbreaks in this world. But situations are situations, experiences are experiences, but it's the stories we tell ourselves on repeat about these experiences, about these situations, that charge it, however it's going to be charged. So the story itself that I had was fairly neutral. I mean, again, looking from the outside, you guys may be like, Brianne, you had a friend, like there was a relationship, a friendship, and then there, you had a midlife crisis. Like, why is this a big deal? But it was all the feelings that I had around it that created the charge, and that created the story, and that created the physical bodily issues that I was having, that was going into this cycle of making it all worse and making it all stay. And so I knew that I could change my thoughts. I knew that I could, see what was going on. I could feel rather than just sweep it under the rug, because I knew that wasn't working. So I had to see and feel what was going on. I had to accept it as what it was right now. I had to accept what had happened. I had to accept the feelings I'd have. I had to accept the situations I'd put my husband and myself into. I had to accept all of it, and then choose a new story, And this was not easy. It took belief and practice and doing it over and over and over, even when it wasn't working. So I kept reminding myself that I was safe. These are the things that I did. I kept reminding myself that I was safe, like reorienting myself to the current present moment. The current present moment reality. That's a really important thing to do. I also forced myself to meditate and just get quiet and still, even when I didn't want to, because that's sucky to face the thoughts that are in your head. And that happens when you get quiet, is the thoughts that are in your head and the feelings that are in your heart, they come. And so I forced myself, even it was just like 3 to 5 minutes. It was not long, but I forced myself to, even when I didn't want to. I got up and did my day and worked, even when I didn't want to. I wrote in my journal, even when I didn't want to. I wrote about what I wanted, though. I tried to focus on not only writing these not terrible, but raw, like poetry. Like, I'm not a poet, but like poetry was coming out of me, and letters to people in my life and things that needed healing. I just wrote and wrote and wrote stuff that would never be seen by anybody. I would never send it, but I just wrote letter after letter. I burned them. I did ceremony after ceremony. I recorded all these voice notes. I did all this writing and just like purging of emotions, and it didn't work. That's what I want to share with you, is it didn't work. I'd be like, this sucks. It doesn't work. None of these rituals and ceremonies are working. My therapy isn't working. None of this is working. But the thing is, it was working. It's just, it was working under the scenes. It wasn't working immediately, but it was working. And so I also, did have lots of times and lots of moments that I was doing things that were bringing me joy. I started taking dance classes when we got to where we live now in Oregon, and I started doing twerking, and it was just so fun. And emotions are held in our hips. And so I really think that was such a powerful avenue for me, was to do twerk class and to get even more into my body. I've always been pretty physical, like movement has always been my medicine and my savior, but dance became this really powerful practice for me. I started going to ecstatic dance every week. It became truly my sanctuary, and it still is. I go, what ecstatic dance is you go, the only rule is there's no talking, and you really aren't looking at other people or even necessarily dancing with other people. You're just letting loose and doing whatever you want on the dance floor for an hour and a half. It's amazing. And I had some serious release moments on the dance floor, looking like a crazy person, I'm sure, but it was it was that feeling of feeling it to heal it, moving it through. Let the emotions move through. Emotions are energy in motion. They need to move. And so I would shake. I would walk to this place in, my neighborhood. It's kind of like a secluded park area. And I'd literally shake like this and shake all the energy out through my hands and through my shoulders, and just, sometimes I'd even make sounds. These are all practices of embodiment. You've probably heard that word, or maybe you practice it yourself, but embodiment practices are involving you bringing the feelings and thoughts from your head or from hidden areas into your body. And you can use tools like movement, sound, breath, breathing. All of these practices help you bring it into your body so you're not just ignoring it. And so our emotions are stored in our bellies and our hips. And so the more I could actually bring these practices to my bellies and my hips, the more it helped resolve a lot of the symptoms that I was having. So again, this is not like an overnight thing. This took a long time. Let's see, what did I say? It was, I just did this stuff again and again and again and again. It was not one and done. It was not an overnight thing. But I knew that I'm just reading right now, but I knew that avoiding feeling the sensations would increase my vulnerability to being overwhelmed by them. Okay. So that's a big one. Avoiding feeling the sensations increases your vulnerability to being overwhelmed by them. At some point when you're just knocked off your feet and you're like, oh crap, what is happening? I'm having a freak out. It's because they've been hidden away. Don't deal with them. Don't deal with those ugly things. Those are ugly. Those are ugly emotions. We don't want to, how many times as a kid were you told, don't cry, or you're fine, We were all told that. And I've told my son that, like, I know I have, but this is what we've grown up with. And so anyway, I did about 15 billion grief ceremonies and rituals, and every time it didn't work, I was disappointed. But then I'd find myself doing another one, and I noticed that it feels bad. This is something I've noticed in my life, and I've shared with a lot of my clients, that the learning process is that it doesn't work until one day it works. And you're like, I get it. And that was about my heartbreak too, is it feels bad. I can't think about anything else. Until one day it's better. And it's, for me and my experience of life, that's the way it works. And I don't know, maybe it's genetic. My son is kind of the same way. Like, he was a terrible reader forever. It wasn't his strong suit until one day I don't know how old he was, but it was later than a lot of other kids. But one day he just picks up Harry Potter and reads the whole thing in an hour. That's a slight exaggeration, but you know what I mean? I guess it's just the way our family works. It's it doesn't work until all of a sudden it does. And so that heartbreak that really rocked my world and rocked my body and made me feel horrible in my body and my mind. And again, there was highs, there was a lot of wonderful things about that time period, but a lot of difficulty. And that happened around the big event that really kind of caused the cascade of events that I just shared, happened around November 2021. And I didn't feel fully healed and over it until February 2023. So that's a month ago or a few weeks ago. And I don't share stuff necessarily. I might share things here and there a little bit in a public platform. I learned this from a guy that I love. His name's James Wedmore. He's a podcaster and a business coach. And he always says that he doesn't share his personal stuff until after he's been through it and learned the lesson. Because sometimes when you're in it, it's not a good time to share. And so I thought that I would do the same thing and not really talk so much about it, even though it's been percolating for a long time. But I really didn't want to talk about it until I'd kind of learned the lessons. And I'm not saying I'm 100% by any means, but I'm so much more grounded and so much more sure of myself. I finally trust myself again a little bit. And, not a little bit. I actually trust myself a lot. And I was able to really realize that I could mine the gold out of that really difficult muck, that difficult, hard time, that challenge, because that old trite saying, it's the challenges that change us, is true. And I was able to mine the gold out of it. It did not happen overnight, but I took the nuggets of wisdom and the gold nuggets from the friendship that didn't work out, from all the goodness of that friendship and that relationship. Even though it didn't work out in the end, there was a lot that I gained from it. And so I took that. I ultimately actually feel more confident. I feel more able to speak my truth, even though sometimes my voice shakes, but I still can speak my truth better than I could before. And interestingly, the voice chakra is very connected to the root chakra. We birth things from both places. We birth expression, creativity, life from both here and down there. Is really an interesting connection. I love the fact that uterus and utterance are very similar in sound. So that's just a little side note there, but I feel so much more confident. I'm definitely more in tune with my body, even more than I was before. Way more aware and in awe of the mind-body connection, because again, my mind and heart stuff really impacted my pelvic health, like super bad. And using my body to over a freaking way too long amount of time in my mind, it took a long time, but using my body, tools of embodiment, practices of embodiment, was able to ultimately help heal my heart and mind. So it's like this impacted this, but this was able to help and heal this. Okay. So I was also, became so much more trusting of listening to my body's whispers before they become a scream. So that's so important, is to really listen to what your body is trying to tell you. I think I wrote in these little notes that I didn't actually really read very much, but I wrote down something. Oh, here it is. Your vagina tells the truth. It cannot tell a lie. This is so true. Your vagina tells the truth. If something is starting to happen, you're probably going to feel pelvic floor symptoms. If something that is starting to happen in your life that's not for your ultimate best, you're going to feel it down there. So your vagina tells the truth. It cannot tell a lie. Listen to those bodies, or listen to the wisdom of your body before it starts to scream. So And so really, in the end, it's give yourself time to grieve. Whatever you've been through, whatever heartbreak you've been through, whether it is from your pelvic floor issue itself, what that caused your heartbreak, maybe, or maybe it was something completely unrelated, like in my case. It's impacting you on many levels, not just a mental thing. It's impacting you all over, more than likely. And so give yourself time to grieve. Don't just ignore it, and don't think it's not a big deal. Like I've said a couple times on here, like some people might think that a relationship thing isn't a big deal. It's not a big deal. But for me, it was. And also that midlife crisis, like who the hell am I thing was a really big, and then COVID on top of it and a big move across the world. It all culminated into a really big deal. And so I had to keep telling. I have a few really amazing friends that I talk to a lot, and I felt like I was talking about this stuff to them ad nauseum, and I thought they were getting, I felt bad, and they kept assuring me, it's okay, you can keep talking about it. But I had to keep reminding me and myself, and they reminded me too, that you don't just get over this stuff super quick. Give yourself time to grieve. It takes longer than you think often, just like healing your physical body can take longer than you think. After a surgery, healing can take much longer than you think. You're normal and you'll get through it. That's the thing, is you will get through it. Our bodies are so resilient and our hearts are resilient, even though it doesn't feel like it at the time. And you might even just come out like a completely new person. And I've had clients actually who come out of their own grieving process of their prolapse, for example, saying, I feel better now than I did before because I know so much more about my body. I know so much more about myself. I've developed a spiritual practice. I've developed a yoga practice, or whatever. These are just examples, but I'm a different person than I was before I developed my prolapse. And I'm glad for my prolapse. It doesn't happen overnight that you may get this kind of aha moment, but it will come if you open your heart and your mind to it. And so when I was going through all this stuff, I didn't share it very much. Every once in a while I'd say little things here and there, but I didn't share it like I just did. But it wasn't because I was hiding or being fake. It was because I was processing things on my own time and I was allowing myself that time and space to grieve. And it was really hard and I kept going. And that is what I want to share is that, I guess a few take home messages. This is going to impact your body. Your body can impact this. It's beautiful. It works together. It takes time to go through it, and keep going. Keep going, keep going. I kept working. For me, we have to keep living our lives. We are alive, so we have to keep living our lives, but that doesn't mean keep going and pretend nothing ever happened. It means keep going, keep living your life, keep showing up, right? We have to keep showing up, but do the work. Do the work to do the grieving, to do the shaking, to do the dancing, to do the talking to your therapist, to do the whatever it is that you need to do to process the emotions. It's really important, and it works, even though it doesn't happen overnight. So that's all I had written down. That's all I have for you. But this is from Heartbreak to Health, and I just want to thank anyone who's watching. I'm not going to keep sharing my story. This was like one and done. That I'm going to pour my heart out about what I've been through, but I think it would be interesting to maybe talk to other people who've had experiences that they would like to share, that follow kind of what I'm trying to say here about the mind-body connection and about how we can get through it. I think it's really important to showcase the mud and the muck and be like, yeah, this is real shit. This is real. But to not get completely dragged down in it. You know what I mean? If all we ever do is talk about that part and don't remember that there is light at the end of the tunnel, even if it's small slivers of light, but it will come. I think it's really important to always be coming at things with a solution seeking and problem solving, solution oriented approach in our minds. It's very important to me. That's one way I think I've kept my Fem Squad community, which is part of my Lift program, so positive, is we're always focused on solution seeking. We can share the crappy stuff that's happening. We can share the difficulties, but we're sharing it from a solution seeking approach and from okay, this sucks right now, but you know what? I'm going to get through it, but I want to share it, And so that's what I want to do with this. I'd love to share more with other people's stories. And I'd also love to share some tools, and just little quotes come to me every once in a while that I want to share. So I'm going to talk more about this. I really just want to humbly bring to light this connection and let you know if you're going through stuff, you're not alone, and let you know that there's a place that we can talk about it. So, yeah, that's where we are. So thank you for watching. And if you're going through something right now, I've been there. I feel you. I see you. And there is light. So keep going. Even when it feels like it's not working, keep going, okay? Write it out. Shake it out. Dance it out. Move it out. Talk to a therapist. You've got this, okay? Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Woo! That's all I have. I'm going to end this. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Okay, bye-bye.